Welcome to the Pay-mentalist Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Banks, and this is the spot for merchants, software execs, and payment sales pros who want to level up their commerce game. Jeremy Hall has been rocking the payment processing scene for nearly 10 years. He's helped hundreds of software companies make sense of their embedded payment go-to-market strategies. You ready to drop some embedded payments wisdom on us?
I love talking about payments, Brandon. Let's do it.
Look, when software companies are evaluating and selecting their payment processing partners, one thing they often overlook is the importance of the go-to-market strategy. This is the key to driving maximum value and revenue. How can software companies find the best go-to-market strategies for their integrated payment services? And ultimately, what factors should they keep in mind?
Yeah, I like that question a lot. So when we talk to software companies about a go-to-market strategy, that's pretty far into the conversation, right? We've generally already talked about the integration. We've talked about some of the things that they're going to need to do as a company. But what I would say is it's so important that when you are a software company trying to get an embedded payments system inside of your software, you have to begin with the end in mind. You have to, as you're talking about the integration and the features that you're actually going to build into your payment offering within your software, you have to know your customers. You have to take the time to dive in and understand what your customers actually need from a payments perspective, because different verticals call for different needs. They call for different features in payments. For example, if you're a software company who offers medical software, right? So an EHR, EMR, you're not really going to care about certain payment elements, right? But what you are going to care about is you're going to care a lot about making sure that you have payment plans for your customers, right? And so you need to make sure that the payment plan element is built into your integration. And the reason why I'm talking about all this is because if you begin with the end in mind, from the integration, you need to have those elements built into payments. Not all payment integrations are created equal. And so you need to make sure you've done your due diligence already and you know your customer and what they actually want so that you can actually provide a solution from a payments perspective for them that's going to be what they need and what they want. Because there's a lot of different elements to the actual go-to-market strategy. Obviously, you need to be able to convert your customer base over to your new payment offering. And then the new customers that come in that purchase your software, it needs to be the best option for them. And that really ensures that you have a bulletproof go-to-market strategy, because they're not going to buy it if it's not what they need. And you need to make sure it's your responsibility to do your due diligence that so that the payment offering you offer is what they need. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think, listening to that, Jeremy, it's absolutely critical that software companies understand that. However, it can be daunting and a little bit overwhelming without a sophisticated level of knowledge, payment expertise. It can be hard to ultimately understand what payment feature and functionality that your clients may need. And so when you are looking at evaluating payment processing partners and relationships and ultimately selecting and working with one, they should be heavily involved in the development of your go-to-market strategy. And they can help you identify the feature, the functionality, the product set that your particular clients will need based on the industries and verticals that you service. They should have extensive knowledge and experience given the vast portfolios that they have to help you do this. So point is rely on the consultancy and expertise of the payment processing provider to help you develop the components of your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
How does focusing too much on transaction fees and tech specs with evaluating payment processing partners affect a software company's ability to see the big picture of a strong go-to-market strategy? Ultimately, that's focused in driving adoption and profits for their embedded payment services.
Yeah, well, when you talk about big picture, broad picture, I think there's a lot of things software companies overlook that way. They always think to themselves, I need to be the cheapest payment option in order for my customers to opt into my payment offering, right? And nothing could be further from the truth. What you need to do is you need to ensure that the value is there. So this goes back to what I just said, right? Make sure that the payment offering you are giving or embedding into your software is valuable to your customers, right? And then it's not so much about the transaction cost. It's not so much about whether you can beat the current price that I have with my payment processor. All of a sudden, uh, a, a you're introducing something into their ecosystem that's a need, right? For example, if you are a software company and you're offering, let's say, a software that helps merchants in the travel industry, there's a couple of things that you are going to have, right? A lot of guys want to pre-auth a card, make sure that there's money on the card before they're actually going to reserve one of their rooms, if you're in lodging, right? And if you don't offer that in your payments offering, what are we even talking about, right? They're not gonna opt into that because that's such an important element for them. And so um, it's so important to take into consideration the value of what you're offering from a payments perspective rather than just, hey, what are your rates, right? If I had $1 for every time somebody said, hey, what are your rates compared to the other person's rates, right? The software company shouldn't be thinking at that level. They should be thinking a level above that. They should be thinking strategy-wise, how do I create the most value? Because when you create value within your offering, then there's adoption that follows that.
Right. I think the combination of payments and the software enhances the value proposition of both. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you talked about the broader picture. One of the things that software companies really overlook is how much value payments can actually add to their business as a whole. One of the things that is a bit unique with what we do is we offer a path for these software companies to actually take on as much or as little of the payments ecosystem as they want, because the truth is payments are a difficult thing to get right, and you have to have somebody that's in the industry, somebody that knows the industry to help guide you through it, because there's a lot of pitfalls that are there that people can make mistakes with. But if you have a good consultant in the payment industry who knows what they're doing and who knows how to navigate those things, you're already a step ahead. And then when you're able to actually section off each piece of the entire ecosystem and focus on one piece at a time and then master it and then move on to the next, it dramatically increases your rate of success. And I see a lot of companies who basically just say, hey, I want to embed payments right now and I want to take on everything right out of the gate. I think that's a mistake because there's too many moving pieces and it's too complex of an industry to nail that, especially if you've never done it before, right? Their core competency is their software and their main product that they offer. It's not payments. It doesn't mean that it can't be, but their core competency today is not payments. And so partnering up with the right provider, partnering up with a consultative group is the number one thing if you're looking for long-term success with embedded payments.
Yeah. I think in some cases where perhaps software companies might bite off more they can chew is the fear of maybe limiting the revenue potential, right? So they say we need to do more because we want more, right? And so again, as it goes back to finding the right payment partner, I mean, there's a lot of elements to consider, right? Obviously, the technical aspect, the platform, the partnership, economics, etc. But there's also things you need to look at, like, does the partnership align with your business's philosophy and ambitions as a business, right? Are they invested in your success and development? So, right, coming into a partnership, they may take on a lot of the operational burden for you and support you as you get entrenched into the payment world. They should also be very concerned about the development of your education and experience as it pertains to payments. They should at least put you in a position where over time you can assume more, take on more responsibility so that the economics become more favorable to you. So at the end of the day, it's about finding flexibility and a partnership that allows you to adapt and evolve based on your unique set of circumstances, with burden that you can bear as an operation and the resources that you have at your disposal. So as your payment solution becomes more successful, the revenue increases, you may want to take in more in-house so that you guys can get a bigger piece of the share. But again, find a partner that allows you to do that.
Absolutely. And the biggest element to that is companies have life cycles, right? So a startup company, for example, is going to, if I were consulting a startup company, right, I would say there's no way you want to take on the total payments burden, right, right out of the gate. It just doesn't make sense for you, right? Number one, you're not to a point where you're probably big enough in order to realize enough additional revenue by taking on multiple components of payments. And so when you're a startup, no, let somebody else do it. Basically, you're going to be in a referral type situation as a startup until you have matured enough as a business that you can now, like you said, take on the operational expense of potentially, hey, maybe I want to actually incorporate selling payments now on my side, or maybe we can support it, but we can't necessarily do any of the underwriting. We can't necessarily do any of the risk or compliance elements around it. But what you said before is so important. People need to understand where they're at in their business life cycle, because that really is the determining factor for what I would recommend a company should do as far as taking on is a lot of the payments elements or a few of the payments elements. And you're exactly right. People always fear, I'm going to lose out on revenue if I don't take on everything right out of the gate. What I've seen from my experience is people end up losing most of the time when they do that, because they don't anticipate how much it actually costs to operationalize payments, right? If they're taking it all on in-house, they don't understand potential losses that can occur, right? People are always frustrated and mad that merchant service companies are taking all of these fees and percentages and all that. But the reality is it's because there are real losses that are taken on the payment side of the house, right? There are real losses. And I promise you, as a software company, you want to do anything and everything to make sure that you don't realize those losses, right? Which is why I say, again, most of the time, you want to avoid the risk and compliance elements of payments if you can. If you get to a point where you're big enough, right, and I'm talking enterprise level, big software companies out there, then it probably makes sense to go down that path, but with a very calculated strategy and a very good payments consultant.
When software companies, they've now implemented a strategy, it's in action, how do they know if it's working, right? Which key performance indicators do you keep an eye on and make sure things are on track?
Yeah. Well, obviously the outcome that everybody wants is revenue, right? They want to grow additional revenue channels through their software company. And payments are really one of the lowest hanging fruit elements next to your core product, right? Generally, you got your core product, and what happens, what I've seen, companies mature, they get really good at selling their core product. Maybe they have a few ancillary services that they sell as well that they can generate revenue from. But then they get to that point where they've squeezed so much water out of those rocks, right? And they start looking for other elements that they can add to their bottom line revenue. And payments is one of the natural next steps there. And so obviously, again, the natural indicator is revenue. But even before that, there's a few other leading indicators that go into looking at, hey, how can I predict what my revenue is going to be from my embedded payments? Again, number one, it's conversion. How well are you able to convert? So there's two elements that people need to consider when talking about conversion, right? The first part of conversion is your current customer base. Sometimes people won't embed payments right out of the gate, and then they'll do it a little bit later. So they're going to have a current customer base that may have some other payment offering outside of the software, or maybe it is even like a basic level integration in the software. But when you choose the company that you're going to go with for embedded payments, converting your current customer base it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, right? People are a little resistant to changing payment processors, but there are some tactics that you can implement there to have the best possible conversion rate that you can. And over time, right, a well-executed strategy over time will help you convert the lion's share of that. But it does take a little bit of time. Where you can have an immediate impact is your net new business. So your net new software subscribers that come in, and with a well-executed strategy there, you should have a very high rate of conversion for your net new. And then you just put some simple revenue projections together and say, okay, based on the conversion rate that I can get with my current customer base and what I can do from my net new customers, and it totally depends on how many net new customers you get monthly, right, for your software. But most importantly, you need to be able to position the payments as a part of your offering, because if you do that, that helps the conversion rate dramatically for your net new. And then again, there's a few tactics for your current customer base that we could get into, but that's probably a whole nother time.
Right.
We could go into that.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think what's important when you talk about a starting point for software companies, right? Proof of concept is always important, right? Prove concepts. And one of the concepts that you need to prove is, can you effectively position, market, and sell a payment service, right? And so your initial approach is, how do I minimize my operational costs? How do I make us very, very efficient? And how can we drive maximum conversion and adoption with that, right? So that's what you work very closely with your payment processor on, is prove that concept. And then you iterate and innovate from there, right? And it can be very dynamic between your partners and the roles and the responsibilities that you assume on both sides. And those can change over time, right? And that's what's awesome about it. A flexible and evolving strategy is that it's a work in progress, right? And usually it's very custom and unique for everyone. It's not the same, right? Now, there are guiding principles and I think rules that that need to be adhered to drive conversion and profitability, but how you do it can differ. And I think that that's what's exciting. So let me ask you, Jeremy, what is the ideal starting point for a software company? It's day one. What am I doing? Where do I get started to prove a concept and make sure that we can do this effectively?
That's interesting. So I'll answer this in two ways. Ideally, a software company from its inception, from the moment that they become a software company, should be thinking about payments. And they should have a payment strategy that runs right alongside of their core product. All right. That doesn't mean that they have to sell payments, right? But they need to have a strategy behind that. And they ideally should partner with a company that can grow with them from day one all the way through a Series A, Series B, all the way through going public if that's what they do, right? The problem with the industry is there are not a lot of companies out there that allow you to grow and mature and change your payment strategy over time. You see a lot of companies today force you down a path that inhibits your ability to grow later on, right? The needs that you're going to have as a startup are significantly different than the needs that you're going to have when you've got 100, 150 employees, you have revenue of 50 to 100 million a year. Those needs are going to be dramatically different, and you're going to care about different things from a payment perspective at those intervals. But the best thing that you could do is have your sales force be used to positioning payments as a part of your software offering, because of the immense revenue that this can provide for you later on. If they get really good at it out of the gate, and it's always been something that's synonymous with your core product, it makes it tremendously easier later on. Okay, now that's for startups. Now, if you haven't done this, right, or if you've basically just had a Band-Aid product as you were a startup, you've got a Band-Aid product, and then you actually start to realize, hey, I could get a lot of revenue from payments if I actually focused on this now. The best place to start would be find a company that is willing to grow with your strategy, meaning find a company who is dynamic enough to not force you or pigeonhole you into a singular approach to payments. Because what might happen, for example, is, you might go down a path with a company where they force you, basically you sign an agreement that says, hey, I'm going to take on a certain amount of risk. I'm going to take on a certain amount of underwriting. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to support it on my side. And because of that, they're going to give you a really good contract from a revenue perspective, which sounds great. The problem is when you start to operationalize this and you hire some sales guys who say they have some payment experience, right? And you start to realize, like, oh no, we're not converting my customer base at where we need to be. What recourse do you have at that point, right? You can't go back and rely on the payment company that you partnered with and say, hey, we want you guys to sell it now, right? Most of the time, that's just not how it works. You signed a contract and it is what it is. You're kind of on your own. Partner with a company that allows you flexibility. Partner with a company that allows you to change your strategy if you need to, because every moment that you are not converting your customer base at the level that you need to, you're losing out. You're losing out on revenue dollars. You're losing out on month over month revenue for your company. So again, put training wheels on. Go one step at a time. Don't feel like you have to bite off everything up front. Partner with a company that allows you to grow over time, and it's the best possible thing that you could do.
Yeah, and it's almost take the pressure off of yourself of having to make the ultimate decision today. Right? The decision that ultimately needs to be today is just finding a flexible solution that's going to give you unlimited optionality down the road. Right? It's interesting, and you've seen it through your career too, Jeremy. I've worked with software companies that never had ambition to do more than just simply throw a lead over the fence to their payment processor. However, they now have a portfolio of thousands of clients and generating all this payment revenue, and they're looking, well, if we could just capture an additional 5 to 10 basis points off of this could be monumental for our revenue and our valuation as a business, right? And they've actually gone on to register as payment companies, right? But it was very hard because they were in partnerships that were quite restrictive in their ability to do that, right? And so the point is don't make the decision ultimately what you will be or won't be. Just look for that optionality and that flexibility. And naturally, as your strategy progresses, it will make you aware of the right decisions strategically that you need to make down the road. Can you share any success stories or tips from software companies that have done this the right way?
Yeah. So we recently had a company integrate, and again, it's a culmination of years and years and years of knowledge in this. But we put a go-to-market strategy together with them where they did just everything right. They just nailed it, right? They positioned this as a part of their software offering, right? And some people, there's a lot of mixed thoughts on that, right? Some people think, well, I don't want to position this as part of my core offering because what if somebody already has a payment set up outside of this, right? I'm now going to potentially lose the software customer because we're forcing them to get payments with us as well, right? Well, you don't have to do it that way. But the smart thing to do is still position it as, hey, this payment offering comes with this. It's included when you are a software customer of ours. This is all included. If you have something currently great, you can use that, right? In the way that our platform works, right, we're able to help them do that. But ultimately, over time, because you thought through the integration, you thought through what your customers are going to need, 9 times out of 10, the current payment offering that they have right now, it's not as good. And so what happens is we end up converting those customers over time anyways. And so, yeah, a recent success story, this company just nailed it. They nailed it from the integration. They nailed it from a customer research perspective. They knew exactly the elements, the features that they needed from a payments perspective inside of their software. And now as they've implemented their go-to-market strategy, they're converting at an incredibly high rate. They're converting their current customer base over because we added a couple of additional elements that most people weren't able to get from an alternative payment solution. So we're converting their current customer base at a very high rate. We're converting their net new business almost at 100%, which is crazy. But it's because they thought through everything. They did it right out of the gate, and now they're reaping the benefits of that.
Right, well, Jeremy, I want to thank you. I think this discussion has been invaluable. And again, something that we prefaced at the beginning, the go-to market, in our experience, is something that's drastically overlooked, and why, unfortunately, a lot of software companies, after getting very excited about what payments can do, selecting a partner, doing an integration, fail to ever really realize or maximize the value from this. And so ongoing, Jeremy, I want to have you on the podcast in the future. We've got a lot of content through video coming out.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem, Jeremy. Hope to see you again soon. For more tips, ideas, and strategies for your embedded payment solution, visit us at next.io.